Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Greetings, Power of Owning Your Career podcast listeners. Today, I had the opportunity to go back to December of 2018. Yes, a couple years ago when the podcast started. It actually started at the end of December 2018 after I wrote the book, The Power of Owning Your Career. And I went back to listen to how I sounded during the first episode. And the first episode, I was talking about teaching project management, which I no longer teach. And it reminded me that in our careers, it's a transformation. It's a transformational journey. And so with each passing moment, you become clearer on what it is that you want to do in your career. And so over time, I got clearer. I tried a lot of different things in my career, but with time, I got clearer to say, let me take this off. This no longer serves me. And it was interesting to hear myself talking in the intro episode. If you get a chance, go back to the intro episode where I'm introducing my why for the podcast. And it's very interesting. I listened to why I was creating the podcast, and the why remains the same, really. The why that I said in the episode was I created it to show success crumbs. I believe that success leaves clues. So I created the podcast to give you inspiring leadership stories about how to get into the driver's seat, how inspiring leaders pivot when they hit adversities, and to get advice that you can apply to your career. I still feel that this podcast serves as this tool. We have over 131 episodes, and so you really can dive in and immerse yourself in some free resources on how to level up in your career. So lest we forget, there's a treasure trove of career episodes that you can listen to get inspired, especially if you're in a funk in your career and feeling stuck in wanting to pivot but not sure how to do it. You can search through and find some very inspiring podcast episodes. So I did my homework today. I listened to the second episode of the podcast, and I listened to Marty. One second here. It's been a number of years. So I just wanted to remind you. Oops. Sorry, I see I'm still listening to it right here.
Marty, this is amazing. I feel like I could talk to you the whole day.
It was a wonderful episode with Marty McDonald. Sorry about that, Marty. Marty McDonald, it's December 21st, 2018, episode 2, Boss Women, Find Your Voice with Marty McDonald. And it was such an inspiring episode. I remember the episode when I listened to it just now, and it just warmed my heart because Marty is so authentic in sharing her story, and she did not have any filters. She talked about, losing a child and how it was an impetus for her to birth her own business. And I love a lot of what she talked about. She talked about the formula for owning your career, which is know your why, create your vision, and to have a plan and work the plan. So much of that makes good sense. If you are in your career and you don't have a plan of what you want to do and how you're going to get there, you don't have the right team around you, this can be the thing that's holding you back. So I want you to think about your career and where you are in your career. And actually, if you're paying attention to your career, I've had clients that I work with where they have simply been too busy doing the job, doing the business, that they don't spend time pouring into themselves and planning for where they really want to go in their career. And so I want to recommend to you, whether you're in the corporate space or you're doing the 9-to-5 thing, and or if you are an entrepreneur struggling to sustain your business or whatever, and not feeling quite steady or stabilized, that there are some tips in the treasure trove of episodes for the power of owning your career that you can leverage. Personally, I know that a plan is important. I have been making time for professional development. So my plan for 2022 is to carve out more time in my career for professional development. Professional development is important. It is not just about working and earning your livelihood, but it's also about growing as a leader, growing in your career. In order to do so, you have to stay learning. You have to continue to consume what it is you're passionate about. So decide what you're passionate about. What is it I'm passionate about? So for example, I, Simone E. Morris, am passionate about inclusive leadership. I'm passionate about career development. And so I work on developing my career, finding tools and strategies to develop my career because it's something that I'm passionate about. The same thing with inclusive leadership. I have been noticing lots of courses around inclusive leadership. And as an inclusive leadership expert, I want to continue to build that muscle, continue to learn and grow. And so I'm doing different things. I'm running a book club where I'm reading more. Reading is important. So making time to read is important in your career. You can be busy doing the day-to-day work. You can be busy meeting. You can be busy with your personal life. But I have found when I have made the time to read books like Atomic Habits, books like Think and Grow Rich. That's another good book that you can consume. Books like The E-Myth, if you're an entrepreneur, The E-Myth is a good book, or Traction, which talks about entrepreneurs' operating system. These are good resources to consume. So you have to find the books that you want to read. From an inclusive leadership standpoint, I'm reading the book Wake Up by Michelle Kim. The point I'm trying to make here around careers is that you want to invest the time to learn, to develop your own curriculum. You don't have to be enrolled in grad school or going back to school. If you are, that's great too. I strongly believe in education. In fact, one of these days, I'll find myself back in school for a PhD. But the thing that I'm saying is you want to develop your own curriculum in the meantime. So what am I learning? When am I learning it? Who am I learning from? What is my investment to level up in my learning so I can level up in my career, and how I show up in my career and how I show out? I credit that language to Bridget McGowan, who has a book called Show Up and Show Out. And I love that, because your career, if you don't show up and you don't show out, no one knows who you are, they don't know your brand, then it is going to be a slow crawl for you. But if you show up and you deliver the goods, and you are, people are clear on what your career brand is, then you can speed up the process of leveling up in your career. So there is much to do. I enjoyed some of the nuggets in the episode from Marty McDonald. She talked about, taking small steps. So taking continuous action, which is something that I really agree with. Take the continuous steps so that you can move forward in your career. So let's say that you decide that you want to switch departments in the company that you work for, or you want to get a promotion. One of the small steps that you could do is to find people who are already in the position that you are wanting to be in. Find those people and get to know them. get to know them, inquire about an informational interview where you can learn more about what is this job about? How did you get promoted? What did you need to do? What advice do you have for me? And doing those things will really help you to create that plan that we talked about initially, to create a plan for career success. So I believe in research. Research is really important. I believe in research and I believe in data. So in order to make decisions, you need data points to tell your story. And you also need to be working on your story, crafting the career narrative that you want to share. So you need to almost be in a position to negotiate or to share your case. Why do I deserve to get promoted? Here's my data points. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'll do if I get promoted. But you also need to have the right people on your team to make that happen. So one small step, as I said, would be to do informational interviews of people who are already in the position, whether it's inside or outside the organization, to be honest, and to ask them for tips and strategies on what you can be doing to move to the next level. The other thing you can do is to start scouting your environment. Who would be a good executive sponsor or even a good sponsor? Who has the power or the authority to help me when I'm not in the room, to help speak on my behalf, to help create space where there is no space, create a seat at the table where there is no seat at the table. I want you to remember that, and I want you to think strategically. If you're thinking tactically, and I know I'm saying take baby steps, which could be tactical, as Marty mentioned as well in her episode 2. If you haven't listened to episode 2 and you want to pick me up and you want to feel good, listen to episode 2 of the podcast with Marty McDonald, and we can put a link to that in the show notes as well. At any rate, you want to think strategically. And that might mean taking a course on how to think strategically. What I found in the corporate space is that not even just the corporate space, but even being an entrepreneur for the last 7 years, that people want you to be thinking strategically and not tactically so much. That you need to do both. You need to be able to elevate yourself to that 10,000 feet above and see the strategic vision, but you also need to execute and get things done, take action. So these are some things that you could think about. So what I was saying is either you could research some articles on strategic thinking, strategic leadership. You could take a course on strategic leadership. There's lots of LinkedIn learnings. There's also, I believe it's called Coursera. That's a resource that you can leverage. But these are things that you could be doing to level up in your career. Listen to episode 2. Stick with us for season 8. Again, I said there are 131 episodes. I am going back through and listening to episodes to inspire me. Today, I was inspired by Marty McDonald of Boss Network and just her mic drop of leaving the organization and deciding to bet on herself. Bet on yourself today, Power of Owning Your Career podcast listeners. I believe in you. I want to hear from you. Guess what? We've got a group on LinkedIn. I give away books from guests, things that they offer to our guests, but you got to be in the space to receive it. So join us over on LinkedIn with the Power of Owning Your Career group. And you can tell me what you thought about this episode, not just this episode, episodes that you listen to, your favorites. And you can also tell me about what you're planning to do. How do you plan to level up in your career as a result of listening to this episode, as a result of listening to the podcast? And join us over on LinkedIn. As always, I'd love it if you left a review for the podcast. Those are important. They give us more exposure. And we appreciate that. So thanks for listening to this week's episode, and stick around. And while you're waiting for the next episode to drop, go ahead and go through those 131 and find an episode that inspires you. I will talk to you again very soon. This is Simone Morris, host of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. If you'd like to connect with me, go to connectwithsimone.com, and I'm happy to connect with you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, everyone.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.